Hi, in 2022, a team of scientists read some people's brains non-invasively. This was a big revolution. It was kind of quiet, but it was a big deal. We're going to talk about how they did it, what happened, what the implications are for the immediate future of the 2020s, and then what the implications are for the longer-term future of the next 100 years, as we like to do on Ftrhstry. So, thing one, what did they do? They put some people in fMRI machines. Now, this is kind of surprising because fMRI machines measure brain activity on the very slow scale of like seconds, because they're tracking oxygen in the brain as it flows through the blood. That is much, much slower than the microseconds at which electrical transmissions happen in the brain. So it's surprising that they were able to extract any meaningful information at all from the brains of the patients that they were scanning. And the way they did this was they set up a baseline for each individual. So they put them in fMRIs and they watched their brains very carefully for 16 hours while they listened to lots of podcasts and stories and other different content from a wide-ranging array of fields, just to get a baseline, because they knew all those words and they could measure the brain activity alongside all those words in that 16 hours. Then, with that information, which was highly specified per patient, per person, not patients, just volunteers, or presumably they were remunerated in some way, per person, there was an individual sort of thumbprint that was created by this experience, which the machine could use to then predict what kind of words they were experiencing when they were listening to other stuff that was not included in the baseline 16 hours. And more impressive than that, they could even predict what kind of words the person's brain was processing while they were watching a silent movie or while they were thinking a story to themselves, which is really the most exciting one. Just sitting there thinking, and the algorithm could pull out meaningful ideas just by measuring the location of the oxygen running through their brain. Very cool stuff, obviously, kind of early tech in this field. Old hat by the 2120s, but in the 2020s, this is some spanky new technology. And in the 2000s, early 2000s, it would have been completely batshit for anyone to suggest that this was possible at all. And that's largely because the algorithmic technology just didn't exist. You had fMRIs, but nobody imagined you could pull this level of depth of information out of them. So, some more complicating / interesting factors involved in this experiment. They also did a couple things like trying to get the volunteers to obfuscate their thoughts intentionally, and it turned out that worked pretty well, especially when they were thinking about things like animals or to some extent numbers. So that would potentially screen out the machine's ability to interpret what they were watching if they were thinking deliberately about something else. So that will be important later as we talk about where this technology goes. Another important fact is that they couldn't apply the readings that they got from one individual to another individual. That individual brain thumbprint was not translatable to the next person's brain, which is also cool and also suggests something interesting about how we all store semantic information. Another thing to say here is that they weren't getting exact word-for-word translations of what they were watching or thinking about or then listening to, but they did get higher-level meaning, which itself is sort of fascinating because it means that there are these places in the brain that are storing ideas and not just specific words, but like concepts, and that's measurable. So really cool findings. Obviously, a lot of promise. Let's move into the basket of what this means for the foreseeable immediate future of the 2020s and early 30s. One thing that's really exciting is that it could potentially help locked-in patients, people who don't have access to the outside world, to communicate. Because if you could read the things they were thinking, you could get a sense of what they wanted, and you could talk to them. Potentially. I mean, you can talk to them anyway, but you could talk to them meaningfully. You could address their meaning and intentions with your own, which could be really useful. If you know anything about coma patients, for example, you might have heard that some people do experience a meaningful version of the outside world with which they can't interact, and that's very frustrating and sad and scary for those people. So it would be really awesome if you had a device that would allow you to interrelate across the gap of communication in your body. So that's really cool. Alongside that, there's just general brain science, like you're learning about where semantic information is stored in the brain, how it's interpreted in the physical space of the brain. Also on the table for potential cool, exciting stuff here is mental health research. You could explore what it's like in the mind of a depressed or anxious or quite angry person and possibly figure out ways to ameliorate those problems. Okay, so the technology itself is still in very early days, and critically, the fMRI approach is always going to be a little fuzzy because, as I said, the oxygen moving through the brain is on a lag from the microsecond electrical transmissions between the neurons that really have all the juice in them. So fMRIs are not going to be the last word in this technology, but the critical translation algorithms are going to be applicable to other faster, snappier technologies like magnetoencephalographic resonance imaging. It's just magnetoencephalographic imaging, I believe. But that has a more up to the minute, up to the moment time scale on it. It's more temporally specific than fMRIs. So that's a sort of next level technology that you can imagine applying this algorithmic interpretation set of tools to. That opens the gate to eventually more specific readings of the direct electrical transmissions in the brain. And that's going to get kind of crazy precise to the point that you can see on a screen something you're imagining in your mind. And you're almost there. Like, the fact that this is possible at all should be really exciting. But of course, you haven't crossed that chasm just yet. So moving forward into that final basket of where this goes long term, you can imagine some scary and some really exciting potential to this technology. One scary version is AI takes over the world and reads everybody's brains and knows what they're all going to do before they do it and can sort of predictively control humanity remotely. That's, mildly intimidating. And we'll loop back around to the beauty of that in a moment. But we should also ping that observation that it is possible to obfuscate by thinking deliberately about other stuff. And you might be surprised when you pay attention to your brain how much sense of control, it's not exactly control, but it feels like control, you have over your own thoughts. Like, next time you get a song stuck in your head, for example, you might stop to notice that although you can't stop yourself from thinking about this song, it keeps coming up again and again, you can actually control a sort of remix function whereby you repeat a small part of the song again and again and again and again until your brain gets sick of you and stops doing it. Or you can think about something else for a little while, go na 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 na, etc. But of course the song's going to resurface, so you can just control it in the granular, is the point there. You can also sort of deliberately avoid things, and there's a field of neuroscience and psychology that is concerned with this evasion or suppression of mental information. And that's relevant because if a machine were trying to read your brain, it might not get 100% accurate vision, and that's going to prevent this technology from being broadly applicable in settings like law, where one thing you might want to reach for is like a perfect lie detector, but it's going to be fuzzy enough, unfortunately, that that's never going to be 100% great. Just like lie detectors in the 2020s are good, but they're not 100% perfect. So you can get sort of like some general impressions of what people are thinking, and you can even do really interesting stuff with that in terms of conversation, but you can't necessarily rely on it in a legal setting. The final field of really exciting stuff here, I think, is creativity, because with the same tools that allow you to talk through a black hole of, say, a coma or incapacitation of some other kind, you could imagine creating whatever you want and using this interface as the starting point for a connection with machine creative tools that's spurred directly by human mental instinct. So imagine the text prompt AI stuff that you're just getting into in 2022. And picture doing that just by thought. So you're looking at an image and you imagine more purple, and more purple comes into the image, and then you imagine more bunnies, and then the bunnies want to be green, and you summon some depth. And you can imagine doing all this with haptics, like your body, or you could just think it. You could just stare at it and create it. And in the later half of the 2100s, back half of the century, this is a large part of creative processes, like thinking through your screenplay or visually imagining an immersive world space might be less clicky and draggy than you'd expect, and much more immersive and thought-driven. Now, zooming way into the 2120s, this tech is like super well understood, to the point that a regular human brain from the 2020s would be readable kind of like a book. And so the beautiful sort of philosophical place to try to take this, I think, is to address the concern that people sometimes instinctively have about the beauty that would rob from the experience of humanity. If you knew everything that was going on in a brain, wouldn't it make it less precious, less magical? And the answer is no, it makes it even more amazing. So by analogy, imagine you're looking at the waves and enjoying the beautiful mystery of water and its sort of transcendent wonder and complexity. And now imagine you could see all of the molecules of water in those waves at the same time. It's just more information. It's still as wonderful. It's not like you go, oh, I get it, it's just H2O. No, you're still dazzled by the glory and complexity of being, the wonder we all get to share. So look forward to that. And remember that as we unlock more layers of the universe, things can still get even more wondrous and impressive, numinous, glorious, spiritual, whatever you want to say. It's not a process of getting more and more disappointed with the simple explanations of life. Rather, increasing awareness should only increase our joy. Thanks for the journey. Looking forward to hearing what you're thinking. If you like this channel and you want to support us monetarily, which would be super cool, you could subscribe to our Substack. That's mostly just a place for you to help us, me, but I'll also share links of things like this article that I read and a couple other places where I found information about stuff. And it's a place where you can comment and talk with other people who like the show. So, hope you're enjoying your life, and I'll see you soon. Bye.